Hey there, I'm Michelle, this is Carolina, and we're going to show you how to make the buffalo pillow. All right, my fabric is cut and I have my applique, and the first thing I want to do is decide on placement of my applique. This is going to be a 16 by 16 inch square pillow, and I think the best placement is in the center. And so I have marked the exact center of my pillow. I used my quilting ruler, which is very handy. So the center of that is 8.5 inches from every side. And I think the center is right about where his heart is. And so I'm going to gently peel back the paper from this fusible backing, and I used Wonder Under, which is some pretty good stuff. And I'm going to place it down right about there. And you can measure to see how far from the side the tail is versus the head, or you can just go with your gut and with what is aesthetically pleasing to you. So then I'm going to take this to the iron and press it on. I've got a damp press cloth. I'm at the iron, and make sure that your applique design is flat, that no pieces are curling under. Place your press cloth over it, and then you're just going to press and lift 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds on each section until you have done the whole thing. And this is heating up the glue. It's activating the glue so that it heats up, liquefies, and adheres to your fabric. And lift carefully, making sure none of the design comes up with your iron, and press. Now I've got some tearaway stabilizer, and I put my applique on first so that I would know where to place the stabilizer on the back of the pillow fabric. So while I can't see it, I can feel it. I can feel where the design is. And I'm just going to pin around this. You could use spray adhesive specifically for fabric. You could use stitch witchery. Just place a couple pieces here and there. You just want to hold this down, or hold this in place, so that when you stitch over your applique, the stabilizer gives the fabric strength and stability, because we're going to be putting a lot of stress on this if we're going to embroider around our design. Now, theoretically, you do not have to stitch this down. But in my house, we are not very gentle with our furnishings, so I always stitch my appliques down. I think and it looks nicer, and you have an opportunity for more design. So for this one, I think I'm just going to stitch around the perimeter of the design on the inside, about 1/8 of an inch away, or maybe right on top. Yeah, you could do a zigzag. You could do a satin stitch, although with this intricate of a design, that might be a little tricky, but it can be done. I mean, you could stitch over the parts where it's a little jagged and you'll lose some of that detail, but that's okay. You still get the nice outline of the design. So we're ready to sew, and I've decided I'm going to do some free motion. I'm going to use a free motion embroidery outline on this buffalo, and just because it's easier for me. If you've never done free motion embroidery, practice it before you get to this project. It takes practice, and the stitches are almost never perfect looking, and that's okay. That's part of the beauty of free motion embroidery. If you are going to use a regular stitch, you'll be doing a lot of pivoting in this design. So you'll be sewing up to, you know, an area like this, put your needle down, pivot, take a few stitches, stitch down, get to the next part where there's a corner or a curve, and you'll do a lot of pivoting. And that's okay. It'll just take a little bit of time, but it's well worth it. So to get started with free motion embroidery, if you're going to do that, you'll need a foot that looks something like this. Some people have an open toe foot and it's easier to see. Mine's closed toe. And you want to drop your feed dogs. That's these ridgy things here that actually help move the fabric when you're doing conventional sewing. With free motion embroidery, you want those feed dogs down so that you can freely move the fabric, because we're not just moving it front to back, we're moving it to side, all around. So I'm going to push, the button is, for mine is on the side of my machine, and you can see those disappeared. They dropped down. So I'm going to pick a spot to start on. And I've just got regular thread in my bobbin. It does match my top thread, which is navy. And I'm going to drop my needle down and lift my presser foot up, and then hold this top thread as I pull up. I'm going to pull up the bobbin thread because we want that out of the way when we get started. Otherwise, it will get tangled up as you start to stitch along. And once I take a few stitches, I can cut those threads away. So I'll drop my feed dog. And you can use an embroidery hoop to do this. And some people use gloves that have sticky stuff on it, or grippy, that grippy material, to get a better grip. I'm going to get some of those someday. So see, I'm sewing sideways. If I were smart, I would turn this way so I could see what I was doing better. And I'm actually moving backwards. And with free motion stitching, you want to use you want to be fast on the pedal and slow in your movements. All right, so I went around once. You could go around a couple times and make a darker outline. Whatever you like. I can take away my pins from the stabilizer. This is tearaway stabilizer. So all I need to do now is gently, see how it's perforated? And it will come away from that stitching line pretty easily. But if it's giving you resistance, don't pull at it too hard because you might take out your stitches. If you've got a spot in your stitching that's not so dense. So I tore away my stabilizer just from the outside edge. I'm leaving the inside edge, the inside there. It's fine to stay there. I think it would be too dangerous to try to poke a scissors in there and try to tear it away. It's not necessary. So now I'm going to put my right sides of my pillow together, and I'm going to pin 3 sides, and the bottom I'm going to pin just the first 3 or so inches from the edge, because we're going to leave this open so that we can turn our pillowcase right side out. All right, I changed my thread to white, changed my presser foot, I changed to a walking foot. You don't have to use a walking foot. I use a walking foot every time I do home deck sewing because it's just easier. And I'm gonna remember to raise my feed dogs back up because I was doing that free motion technique. And I'm gonna sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. At the corner, right when I get to a 1/2 inch away from my edge, I'm going to pivot and take 2 stitches across the corner and then go back to my 1/2 inch. And that supposedly helps the corners from being pointy, ultra pointy looking after you fill your pillow. So now I'm on my 4th side, and I just stitched about 2-3 inches from the one edge, and I'm leaving this bottom part open, and about 3 inches from my last edge. I'm starting there, and I'm going to take a couple back stitches because this seam will be feeling stress when we are inserting the pillow form. And you're going to trim off your corners, reduce bulk there. And then we're going to turn the pillowcase right side out. Get that mess out of the way. And I have a point turning tool that I do like to use. It looks like this. And just work that corner out. You could use the dull end of it or the wider end of a chopstick or the pointy end. Just be careful not to put too much pressure on your corners and poke your tool through it. So now I'm pressing my open seam allowance under a 1/2 inch. To get that nice crisp line where I'm going to slip stitch, and I'll do that by hand. You can use the machine, and then you have to sort of compress your pillow as you're butting it up against the machine after we put our pillow form inside. So I've decided to finish this off on the machine, and you might want to do it by hand because it is a little tricky. You do have to pull things very taut, and you're almost wrestling with the pillow form to keep from pulling the fabric over to the left. So I've got my arm on the pillow form trying to control it a little bit. And you could also make this a removable pillow cover by inserting a zipper. Then you can wash it. And that's our buffalo pillow.